These are the stories of Careblazers, the stories of husbands, wives, sons, and daughters whose world is forever changed since caring for their loved one with dementia. You'll hear stories of heartbreak. You'll hear stories of love. These stories are real, raw, and powerful. I hope these stories show you you're not alone, and I hope they give you some inspiration and help as you go through your caregiving journey.
All right, Ross, thank you so much for being willing to share your story with other Careblazers out there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you care for.
Well, you already said my name. My wife's name is Kay Calvert, and we've been married for nearly 52 years. She was originally diagnosed with probable Alzheimer's in 2008. And of
Mhm.
course, other tests and so on have pretty much affirmed that original diagnosis. I would guess that her decline from diagnosis or probable diagnosis until um, a year and a half ago, from the complete wife down to what she was a year and a half ago, was probably about 15%. It
Wow.
wasn't huge.
Mhm.
Uh, I would think we moved actually from Dallas, Texas area to outside of Philadelphia. And Kay is a very much of a social butterfly, and I think she had quite a lot of friends that would talk with her and everything. And when we began the pandemic, like with so many people worldwide, she just, in fact, it was quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer when somebody did an interview similar to this, I suppose, but for the print media. I said that she had literally, in a matter of months, corkscrewed straight to hell, to her own private hell, and that's exactly what happened. I would say decline from full K till now has probably been 85%.
Wow.
She has developed, in just the last year, she's developed uh, so many problems. She's beginning to have communication difficulties, and I was dealing with that pretty handily until about um, July last year, and it became increasingly more difficult. She was wandering. She would get up at when I was sound asleep and leave, and
Wow.
she was returned by security people one time. I had no idea she was even out of the apartment,
Wow.
um, and so it began to become more terrifying. It wasn't just inconvenient. It wasn't just sad. It was terrifying, and uh, we finally had another disappearance, and it just happened to follow a week or a week and a half of her saying repeatedly, "I should just die."
Mm.
And when she disappeared, I was unbelievably scared. And we have a kind of a catchment pond with geese and all kinds of stuff in it. And I literally ran, which is very difficult for me to do because of some physical problems, down there as quickly as I could. And God forgive me, I was searching the water and
Oh.
excuse me, and looking in the well lit areas. Finally, I just started driving around the campus. It's a large facility we have here that we live in, about 1,700 residents. And I finally went to the security gate, and I asked the guy if any single women had walked out, and he said no.
Mm.
I gave him a description of what my wife was wearing, what her name was, and everything, and he called an APB and
Mhm.
security people who, patrol and wander and whatever, and all got in cars and started driving around. I returned to our home thinking maybe she would come back there, and I saw a female security person, and I said, and she was on her phone. I said, "I suspect you're talking about my wife." I live over here, blah. And she said, yeah, that's what the conversation was about. So I turned around and started going back to the car, and my wife comes out of an adjoining building,
Mm.
barefoot and without a mask, one of which was highly recommended, and the other one which was absolutely necessary at the time. So we went inside. I hugged her for a long time. I held on to her while she went to sleep, and then I literally reached the end of my rope, and so I called my older daughter who lives in Philadelphia and told her that we had reached that point where she needed to go over to what's called Rose Court. It's the place where skilled nursing and continual care and memory care and other things all take place. And
Yeah.
and in what excuse me, and what has to be considered probably the saddest day of my life, we turned her over.
Mm. How long ago was that?
July.
Okay.
She lasted 3 days there, and then became explosive, throwing furniture, screaming. I was notified at some point, I think several hours after this had taken place, but somebody called and said, oh, we wanted to tell you that your wife has been transported to the hospital. And I said, what?
Wow.
And they said, yeah, she was having, there's a cutesy term that they use here, and I don't know if it's indigenous to just this facility or if it's somewhere else from some university spawned it, but I hate it. It sounds like the name of a makeup product. It's called actions and expressions. Yes, she was having actions and expressions. Well, what the hell is that? And then they started giving me better description. And they said she's been transported to Riddle Hospital. So I called my daughter in downtown Philadelphia, and she's about 45 minutes away from here. And we both start screaming toward that hospital when my daughter calls and says, Dad, she's not there. I've called the ER. They don't know anything about it. So not only did they not inform me, even though I live in the same facility and only 5 blocks away from her, from them, but they gave me the wrong information. So
Oh my.
that began a very serious lack of confidence with with this place.
Yeah,
And
so you just didn't know where your wife was at that point.
the people at Riddle Hospital made a suggestion. They said sometimes when the ambulance people are transporting folks, they make an on-the-spot decision. This is a psych case. We've got to go to the nearest psych ward. And so they suggested a place called Chester Crozier or Crozer Chester. I never can remember which. And we went there. I was getting hysterical phone calls from the other 2 kids, one of whom is in Austin, Texas. The other is in Vail, Colorado area. And they were saying, Dad, don't go in the hospital. They got COVID there. Don't go in the hospital, whatever you do. And my daughter just bullied her way in anyway. And they had given her a COVID test when she arrived, and it was positive. And my daughter said, wait a second, she just had a test 2 days ago and she was negative. She hasn't been anywhere or done anything. And I insist upon a 3rd test for a tiebreaker, which they provided, and it was negative. And so were the next 2 tests negative. But she was kept in the COVID ward for 6 days. So I suppose mainly we should just be happy that she didn't get COVID, because this is pre-vaccination. And so a lot of missteps, a lot of crappy communication, a lot of heartbreak. And she was released after the 6 days because there's only a certain amount of time with I can't remember what it's called. It's a number, the legal hold you can have on any kind of psych patient. And my son, who can sound very lawyerly, even though he's not, said, "You have until Saturday, and then we're picking up my mother." And she went back and was settled in pretty well. She was in skilled nursing before because they didn't have room, but they did develop a bed in memory care, and so she went into her own room. And after about 2.5, 3 weeks, things began to disintegrate again. There's another blow up, and this time she's transported to Roxborough Hospital, which has a psych ward, with a very competent, I believe, female psychiatrist who runs it. And essentially what they did was establish what drug protocol my wife needed to be on. And when she was released from there, everything sort of moved into a set of situations that could be handled locally without transporting her anywhere or anything like that. Yeah. She occasionally has difficulties. She has quite literally turned into somebody I never knew before. She has been combative with her own aides from time to time. And I keep telling her, these are people who are doing their best to take care of you. You've got to be better with them. She really doesn't like anybody. And I found this out myself I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, I found this out myself later, because when things got to a point where I really thought, this is really crappy management, I don't like it. So I started telling people I'm taking her out, and they said, "We do not recommend that." And I said, "I don't care. I'm taking her back to our apartment where we lived for 3.5 years or whatever." And I did. And it was like a honeymoon at the beginning. And then after a couple of days, it disintegrated a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And it got to an explosive confrontation at 3 a.m. one morning, when she had had a toileting incident in the bed. And I had already done the sheets a couple of times that day. And I said, "Let's go into the bathroom." And I said, "I need for you to get into the shower so we can get you clean." "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" And trying to explain it didn't help. And she gradually got to the point where she was enraged, and she screamed, "F her, F her," if you fill in the blanks, 4 times at the top of her lungs. I thought, this is going to be great. People live above me, below me, and on both sides, and I'm going to have fun explaining that. And I had to admit, and it was hugely embarrassing, but I had to go back hat in hand and said, "I couldn't do it. I didn't think you were doing it right. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't, but I didn't do it at all." So then we ran into financial complications, and I know I'm making this very long. I'll try tie it off very quickly. I got a bill from this place, and I said, "What the hell? You're charging me for the 10 days." 10 days was all it was. 22nd of February to the 6th of, 22nd of February to the 3rd of March. "She wasn't with you, she was with me." "Oh, that's the bed hold fee."
Oh, no.
Said, "Okay. And would I have had to pay for it if she were still in my apartment, our apartment?" And then I said, "What the hell are these charges for home help, or whatever you call it?" "Well, didn't so-and-so tell you that you're going to have the responsibility for paying that?" And I said, "No, we absolutely did not have that discussion." "Well, okay, we will pay through the end of March or whatever it was, and then you have to pay for it." So in raw numbers, it costs me $9,400 for her to stay in memory care. it costs me about $4,500 every 2 weeks for the 11 hours a day. And I whittled that down from a bigger number eventually for home help aides. So we're talking about around $28,000 a month for my wife.
Wow.
We have long-term health care plans. Hers pays at the current time $315.11 a day, which doesn't quite pay just the $9,400 for memory care. It doesn't touch the other part. And so now it's a financial conundrum. And though this community has, like many communities, has a kind of guaranteed, once you're in for life. And if you can't pay, it doesn't matter, we'll take care of it. But I'm looking desperately around at other places because I've lost so much confidence in this that I just, hopefully none of the administration is listening to this. But anyway, that's kind of where we are. It's gone from being emotionally beaten up by the changes wrought by the pandemic and my wife, being confused by the lack of explanation, the no conversation at all from the doctor that's in charge of my wife over at Rose Court, the strange things and the financial things. And it's gone from stage to stage to stage now where it's really largely a question of money. And it certainly has done nothing to settle the confusion and everything that we had and just her emotional decline. Now it's way more complicated. And I hope that none of the people that listen to this have similar experiences. I hope that, that they are able to have greater confidence in the staffs that may be involved with a spouse if their spouse is actually institutionalized. I hope that if their spouse or family member is still at home and they're taking care of them, that they have greater resiliency and fortitude than I was able to muster. I feel in many ways like I failed. And I could never have imagined as recently as 6 months ago that I would ever say something like this. But I have a therapist.
That's great.
No, not so much.
It hasn't been helpful.
Yes, it has. She's a wonderful person, but it's just something I never believed in before. I obviously do now, but it's one revelation after another, none of which are very particularly happy.
Right.
I was talking with my younger daughter who lives in Colorado, and she said, Dad, when Mom went in to Rose Court, I was prescribed with depression medication, antidepressant medication. And you might as well know that Brian is taking it too, my son. And I said, my God, you're the strongest woman I know almost. I don't believe this. And she said, it has nothing to do with strength, which was something that I needed to learn to understand because I didn't at that point.
Right.
Okay, I've talked long enough and I'm sorry for the emotion, but
No.
I can't deal with the subject without it.
Yeah, no need to apologize, and it's totally natural. And I think what you're discovering is, in many ways, it takes a lot of courage to be willing to get the help like you're getting. Yeah, so it's sometimes people take it as a sign of weakness, but I think one of the hardest and strongest things somebody can do is to say, yeah, I need some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The postscript, I know I said I was finished, but the postscript on all that was I found out that the third kid was also on antidepressant medication. And so now I am. something else I never could have imagined saying. Because I mean,
Right.
always been this sort of Gibraltar, like, yeah, you're not gonna. I don't believe in that crap, and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so life has dealt me a lot of funny hands, and it's left me way confused. Things I was absolutely certain about before, I'm not.
Yeah.
And everything is sort of a new page in a chapter that I didn't anticipate having to read.
Right, right. And as much as we might have ideas and thoughts about how the future is going to work out, we truly have no idea. There was no way you could have ever predicted your wife was going to end up in this condition and need the help, and that she wouldn't be safe to be alone, and that the place where she went was going to be, there's going to come challenges with that. Like, there's no way to predict any of it.
Right.
Right. But up to now, with everything you've been handed, you're managing through it. It's hard, but you're managing through it.
Um, I'm not managing through it.
What are you doing? What would you say it is?
I would say there are chemicals that are certainly helping manage me through it, and the
But
support.
I just want to pause and just interrupt, because it's easy for a lot of care blazers, no matter what the situation is, whether it's medications or just accepting help in the home. Like, you are the person who had to walk through the door and stick to an appointment and say you needed help. You are the person that, even though somebody prescribed something, is the person who's taking it day after day, right? Like, that is all you. And so I want to give that to you, because I know a lot of care blazers like just want to like push it to the side and say, not give credit to themselves for what is actually happening. So for food for thought for later, just maybe let that sink in a bit. The meds don't do anything sitting in the container, you know?
I suppose that's true.
Yeah. So your wife is in this place now. Um, are the behaviors at the same level as they were in the beginning, or does it seem to be settling some?
No, but she's when I brought her here, I had to sign for drugs and whatnot. She takes 19 pills a day, and I don't have the background. I don't have, the exposure to written documents or anything. I don't know to what degree they're desperately needed, or to what degree they just kind of fell into place because one person recommends this, another person recommends this, whatever.
Right.
It seems like an awful lot of medication. I can't help but to suspect that regardless of what the medications are, that there's going to be some interaction among 19 pills that are going to cause some rearrangement of personality and behavioral patterns. It's That's one of the things that I'm most afraid of. She has, I'm going to forget the name. She has Ativan, I think is her PRN, and she has Seroquel. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is another one. One of them has the black box label warning from whatever,
Mm-hmm.
FDA, and the other one's just a hard hitting drug that I just.
Yeah.
They may be signed each blister pack because that's the way they distribute things here. So I'm sure it's a CYA move so that nobody overdoses or whatever, or does the wrong thing. I mean, it's all labeled so a chipmunk can handle it. But I had to sign, like I said, each cardboard thing, and I was told don't give any more than 3 of these in a day. Well, in 10 days' time, I think I distributed 8 pills in situations where where I didn't know what else to do. It seemed really desperately necessary. I have no idea how many she gets in a regular day. I know that sometimes I'm in there and she seems lethargic. She seems drugged. There are other times when I'm in there and she's crying. And today, I visit every day, but she was saying, "Why can't we go away?" I said, "Because it's a weekend and I need permission and blah blah blah." Um, but she can be up or down. So despite this protocol of drug management or whatever, it doesn't provide an even keel. It may, in the long run, the highs and the lows may, if you flatten them all out with an iron, may equal a horizontally flat line, but it doesn't demonstrate it behaviorally, in my view, that she's got an even keel.
Yeah. And then through because you've been visiting through COVID, while COVID has been happening, were you able to visit all of the time, or were there ever any times when they said you couldn't come in?
There were times. They began vaccinating here, and since she was in the Rose Court, she was among the first people to be vaccinated. And since I was the spouse who was likely to visit, I was allowed at the same time. So we were both double vaccinated by January.
Okay.
So for a long time.
And then once that happened, you were able to go in for visits.
Yes, except they've had outbreaks. This is very irritating to me, but and it's not, doesn't seem to be uniformly adhered to by other institutions in the area. There's some people. I'm in a support group at University of Pennsylvania. So in addition to yours and that one, I'm also in one right here at the place where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had an opportunity to listen to lots of people's opinions and exchange stories and so on and so on. But well, there was a destination in mind when I started down this road. Now, what the heck could it possibly have been?
You're talking about different places adhering to different guidelines in terms of visits.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
There's a group of, you know, how these kinds of institutions seem to be owned by mega corporations, and there are three of them that belong to one particular. And the people in the Penn group said, oh, well, the employees there were told that they had till the end of March or April or something like that, and they're terminated if they don't show proof of having been vaccinated. Here, they say we can't require, because of HIPAA and other things, we can't require that people get vaccinated. And I said, so wait a second. You hire a vast number of employees who go home every day into communities where people haven't even begun to get vaccinated yet, and they come back and forth, and they deal with this select population of people who are already at risk, and you cannot require them. No, well, we don't require them. That's insane. You know, that's like saying, well, we can't make people drive at 35 miles an hour when we put up a speed limit sign. You know, it's on their rights. Bull crap.
So in some ways, somehow this has prevented you from being able to keep visiting at some point because of outbreaks, or?
No, it did. There was one point when I couldn't, because it involved people in her cohort or whatever you want to call it.
Got it.
There are different hallways, and obviously the one where my wife is locked and secured, and so that's probably they're the safest of the ones that are in Rose Court. So, but there have been outbreaks. There were a couple of employees just 2 weeks ago who had contact with all kinds of people on the floor where they were working. Everything shuts down, and I feel so sorry for those families, because they have no contact. I have virtually unlimited contact. In fact, 24 hours a day I can go in.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Not that I would, but
right. But it's the visitation policy is a bit loose there. Yeah.
Way looser than it was a month, 2 months, 3 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you visit your wife, like, how are those visits? It sounds like sometimes she asks to leave. Are they pretty, like, do they vary based on the day?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Then there's no way of predicting it. I pointed out to my kids that this week has been a terrible week every single day. You know, I would go in. It was recommended that I show up at 11 o'clock, and then at 12 o'clock she goes to lunch. And I said that would really make it a very nice clean breaking point because she's off to eat. And so I was kind of stuck to that schedule. I don't have to, but I have for convenience sake. And I was complaining about how terrible everything had been. I would take her out of the activities that she was involved with, and she would just give me almost a hateful stare, and then stalk out of the room, and we'd go to her room, and then she would, with her shoes and everything, just lie down on the bed and fold her arms, close her eyes, and try to go to sleep. And I'd say, so you're really going to take a nap? You know, I'm here to visit with you. Anyway, so it was a terrible week until today. She was laughing and smiling when I arrived. And that's, you know, that more than anything keeps me rocked back on my heels as if I were a boxer. It's like, gee, do we have a flag or something, you know, some little precursor or symbol that will tell me it's a good day, it's a bad day, and I don't have to find out by getting a bloody nose. So anyway, in answer to your question, no, it's not the same each day. It's quite different.
So Ross, what are you doing to you already mentioned some, like you're going to therapy, you're taking medicine. It sounds like you're in several support groups. Anything else you're doing to just support yourself? I mean, this just sounds incredibly challenging, heartbreaking, emotional, kind of like a roller coaster ride. What are you doing to help yourself? Sounds like you have some supportive family you can talk to.
During the pandemic, I wrote 2 books. I had not written a book before. And when I say write, it sounds way better than it really is, because it's not written for publication. It was printed, and I've got 10 copies of each book, but they were done for family members. And the idea being that, you know, here's our history, because we're going to have grandchildren and they're going to have children that won't know us. I began the whole pandemic by signing up with one of those genealogy companies, MyHeritage, and expanded my family tree to about, I don't know, 17 or 1800 people, I think. Had it all bound in a book. I didn't obviously do all the research. I provided the information to kick it off with, and I followed through with it, and I got copies for my brother and my sister. And I thought, well, that was cathartic. It was therapeutic. Why don't I continue in that? And so then I thought, okay, I'll write a book that will explain to descendants, this is who we were. This is where we came from. This is what we did. This will sound terribly vain, but you can agree with it to a certain extent, because you and I share, as you know, a history of living in Europe and everything. And I think that we lived an absolutely fascinating life. I think we had opportunities and capabilities beyond those that are given to most people. And I wanted to record it all. So I did 479 pages worth.
Wow.
And then after that, I decided, well, it's clear the writing is on the wall. I'm probably, even though, and this is so difficult to explain to people, I'm so happy with my life and what it's been, what we have accomplished with our kids. They're in lasting marriages. They have their own kids who are all good kids. And I'm ready. I'm done. I've done everything I wanted to do. I could go tomorrow and feel prepared and not at all sorry, except for my wife. And I thought I should introduce her more to the descendants than anybody else, because chances are, against my wishes, I'll probably still be around for a lot longer. And anyway, that's the reason I wrote this. The next book was called Grammy, because that's what her grandkids call her. And she had, among other things, taught reading, something she's barely capable of doing now. And I, realizing that, I changed my direction a little bit and did what I called photo essays for different questions, and just provided lots of pictures with captions, most of which I thought were humorous. And I knew that she would be able to appreciate that. And I also knew that the kids who were 4, 5, 6, and that would understand something about what was going on. There are contributions made by childhood friends, college girlfriends, people that she worked with professionally, and family. And I wrote probably half of it.
So you reached out to people who were important to her life along the way and had them contribute.
It was a Facebook thing, and unfortunately, I heard from several after the thing was already printed. I heard from, well, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know how to get in touch with you. And
yeah, that's an amazing thing that you did there, to write those books and put that together, and just a creative project that sounds in a way therapeutic to do during a time when there really wasn't much else to do.
It was therapeutic, but I have winced a little bit with guilt, because while I was doing that, I was not there for my wife. She would sit in the other room and watch the news, CNN, all day long, screaming at the television screen, whatever the latest thing is that inflamed her about the former president.
What would you imagine, though, you would have been doing if you weren't writing the book and you were there for her, as you said? What would you have been doing?
Holding her hand, watching the same thing, I suppose, but being there. Occasionally she would come back to where I'm sitting now and say, can you come out? And I said, yeah, I am. I just had a little, I'll be out.
Mm-hmm.
It might be half an hour later. And it didn't really sink in at the time that, you're missing something. I'm not sure that I could have put the brakes on and slowed the process and extended it or anything like that. But I do feel some guilt about the fact that it diverted my attention from my wife, who's been the focus of everything.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because you started that book in many ways to help commemorate your wife and share her memory with other people.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So what has been the most helpful thing for you? Like, if you could recommend to somebody else in a challenging position like yours, what would you recommend they do to support themselves? Because I think a lot of people are really good at the guilt trips. They're really good at playing the history and rewinding and wishing maybe they would have done things differently, right? We know all the things that aren't so helpful. What would be, to anybody watching, something you think would be helpful that could help them?
I'm learning now, way too late, that it would have been more helpful for me to read extensively about this crappy disease that we're involved with. I thought I knew a lot about it because, sadly, the family has not been able to escape this disease for generations. And now my wife they're all dead except for my wife. Her mother also had Alzheimer's. And, my poor kids, like my older daughter says jokingly, when I can't find my keys, I'll say, is this the beginning? Mm-hmm. And I had at one point offered to have them tested. And I knew that always presents a quandary. It goes back to the two sisters who were studying some neurodegenerative disease in South America and a community that was on water stilts. I can't remember much more than that, but they absolutely did the research and came up with a diagnostic tool that would let people know, yeah, you're going to have this. You've already got it in your genetic structure. It's probably not going to come out until your 20s or 30s or whatever. One of the two women jumped on it right away and took the test. The other one refused. She said, I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem, because some people don't want to live with the burden.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the flip side of that is you could live with the relief of knowing that it's not coming.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, all three of my kids said no, they didn't want it. So.
Yeah. So, but you mentioned like your recommendation would be for people to read about it. If you had read more about it, like educated yourself more about this disease, how do you think that would have changed in the big picture?
I wish that I had thought to print out the letter, somewhat scathing, excoriating letter that I got from my younger daughter today, who said, Dad, you don't have the personality to be a care provider for somebody with this disease. I can't remember what the three things are. Crap, why didn't I print that? Anyway, something about patience and whatever. And she's right. I said, those three things that you described exactly describe your mother to a T. I'm diametrically opposed personality wise and in every other way wise from your mother. I know that. And we all know that. I'm brusque and I'm, much more likely to shoot from the hip and be emotional. And my wife is sedate and, under normal circumstances, loving and caring. And she's right. Everything my daughter said is absolutely correct. And I hope to hell she doesn't see this, because I don't want her to be admitting it to her on the air. It's a problem because she's an occupational therapist.
Yeah.
And she has worked with elderly people with dementia. So she has a skill set that I'm only trying to discover now, and I should have been working on a long time ago. I mean, I understand the concepts of redirection and stuff like that, but I don't have the vocabulary. Give me a suggestion. Okay, don't tell me to redirect. Tell me how you would handle this situation to get somebody moving in a different direction. And that's what I'm mainly deficient in. And we had an opportunity, because of course, one of them lives here anyway, but all three kids assembled last week before the weekend, 2 weekends ago, and stayed for 3 or 4 days. And so there was a lot of discussion and so on. But yeah, I could easily have been much better educated. Oh, I didn't finish. My older daughter, my son, first of all, has a wife who's a nurse. So clearly he gets opinions about what I should do and so on. My older daughter is the administrator of a department within the University of Pennsylvania's School of Arts and Sciences called Mind Core. And she has within her department, and she's not an educator, she's an administrator. She has within her department heavyweights in the field of neurology and she can ask a question about this disease and get 15 different responses. And so anyway, they're better educated than I am, and so that has made it difficult because it sets up frictional areas.
Yeah.
But I'm the one who's here,
right?
And they're not, and so
right.
that's the other frictional area.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to say this, offer it to you, but offer it to anybody listening. It's really easy to beat ourselves up and be able to see in hindsight, that old saying, hindsight's 20/20, right? Like to think about like what you would have done differently or could have done differently, or what you should have learned sooner. But like, you're only making decisions the best you know how based on the information you have at the time, right? So you have to have I like to say, have your own back in that. Like now you have all this other new information and you've learned new stuff and you're realizing you didn't know that back then. Does nothing to beat yourself up and hold you to the standard that you didn't even know existed at the time you made your decision, right? Whatever it ended up being. So just want to offer that to anybody who's watching that right now, and to you, Ross. And I just thank you so much for sharing your story, your life circumstances right now, the challenges, the heartbreak. I can't even imagine, how that feels day in and day out. And I just want to say, like, you are an incredibly strong person to be going through what you're going through, continuing to go through what you're going through, visiting your wife when you're able to. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean it looks pretty. It doesn't mean you always know the right thing to say or do. But it does mean you're continuing to show up. And I think that is something any human being in Careblazer should be incredibly proud of and give yourself credit for. And it's hard because even if you're doing everything right, it still doesn't feel good. And I think that's where a lot of challenges come. It's like, this doesn't feel good. This feels awful. And you could still be doing everything the best that you can, and that's okay. So.
Okay. I thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm. I know it's hard. But I especially want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story, because I imagine there are other people out there in the world who are feeling like you are, or beating themselves up for things maybe they didn't know, and who have a loved one similar in a position to you. And just, it can be therapeutic in and of itself just to know you're not alone. So thank you for having the courage to come on and share your story. I do appreciate that.
Thank you for asking me to share.
Yeah. Is there anything, Ross, you want to share, or any last words you want to say to anybody watching?
I guess just reiterating that the best thing you can do is educate yourself as thoroughly as possible. Mm-hmm. I'm a crappy reader, which is a terrible thing for somebody who's taught for 35 years to admit to. But I am. There's probably some processing glitch or something that makes it difficult for me. But the last thing I'll do is reach for a book. Mm-hmm. I'll watch a program. I'll talk to somebody. I'll listen to, I can't remember her name. What's Deepa Snow?
Teepa Snow.
Teepa Snow. Yeah. I enjoy her because she's when people have that ability to give practical advice and solutions without even thinking about it, it makes me jealous, because I sit there and contemplate and work and think about it, and I can't come up with anything.
Well, that's why you watch the videos, because then you'll get it and then you can apply it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ross. All right, Careblazers, for watching. Thank you so much for being here.